Good morning, everybody. This is Zach Said It Again. I'm your host, Zach Cooley, and I'm very privileged and honored to have the author of one of my brand new favorite books, let me be sure I have this right now, the Definitive Golden Girls Cultural Reference Guide. Mr. Matt Browning is on the phone with me. Thank you for being with me, Matt.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I unfortunately I had planned to come to your event in Princeton, where you had Julie McCullough. That would have been a real thrill to be able to meet her and talk with her, but I unfortunately missed that. And but you were kind enough to send me a copy of your book, which I read through immediately. And you would be surprised how many of these references, when my wife and I are binge watching the show, that we've Googled. And some I still didn't know. So we've been waiting for your book for a long time, and I thought it was just really great.
Well, thank you so much. I hear that often because I knew there would be a lot of references, but I didn't know there would be 400 pages worth.
Yes.
The book is very thick.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, it is. And it's you referenced to just about everything. If you don't know what Coca-Cola is, or Bengay, or if you don't know who Paul McCartney is, it's in there. And
I tried to include people, movies, things like that, but I also included brand names and companies and businesses. And some of the stuff I figure a lot of us know, like Coca-Cola, but there's so many in there that I think a lot of people don't remember.
Right. And you had said before in other interviews that you were born in 1980, and there were some that you did not know. You watched it in its original run. I was born in 1985, the year that it came out, and I remember watching it in its original run and being 3 years old and not knowing the concept of the episodes, but every time I would see Estelle Getty on the screen, I would say, Ma. I feel like those ladies raised me, in a sense.
That's a good way to put it.
Because they remind me of my grandmother and my great-grandmother, my great-aunt. I think everybody can draw back to somebody, but I can draw back to just about everybody, all four of them in my family.
Now, isn't it funny, too, to watch it as an adult and you get all of the adult jokes that they made? It's a very different experience from watching it as a kid.
The things that you didn't get, and the fact that they could get away with those jokes because they didn't explain them in graphic detail. It's still my daughter's 8 years old, and it's still safe to watch with your kids because it can still be funny, and they can still get certain things, but the things maybe they shouldn't be able to quite get yet, you don't have to worry about because they didn't blurt it out or draw you a picture of what it was.
And I think too, being in the 1980s, they were very ahead of their time, and I think maybe because they were older women, they were able to get away with some of that more adult kind of humor.
Very much so. Very, and I had they've been doing these film screenings at movie theaters of 5 and 6 episodes at a time, and I went to one of those recently with a friend of mine who is gay, and they were doing the episodes with Blanche's brother, who wanted to be married, and Blanche was trying to be accepting and yet come to terms with it in her own way, and things like that. And I was born with cerebral palsy, so the most culturally conscientious episode, in my opinion, is when Blanche actually dates a man in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for me, he turns out to be a jerk. But, that's something you don't see even today. I mean, it seems like everyone has their advocates. Every ethnic group, every orientation has, but disability does not discriminate. And and as a disabled person who is a husband and a father, I have to fight for my role in society and say, yes, I am a valuable parent. Yes, I am a valuable spouse. It's not just a one-way street. I have to fight that to this day. So the fact that the Golden Girls even touched on that in 1988 or whenever it was is pretty amazing.
And you're right. You don't see that happening much today.
You don't.
So, yeah, they were very much ahead of their time. And what they talked about is still relevant,
Yeah.
In some cases for worse and in some cases for better.
Right. And just the favorite line in that episode is when Blanche says, "Nervous me, wheelchair," because I joked that I said, my wife said that when she first met me and we were first starting to get, it's just, "Nervous me, wheelchair." But, and then the UFO episode.
That's a great one.
The UFO, my town, Whitfield, Virginia, 8,000 people, was subject to an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, national television shows, in 1988 when that episode came out. And
really?
And Dorothy makes the joke. I was going to have it pulled up, but I don't. Something to the effect that the only people who see UFOs are fat guys in overalls from Arkansas named Cooley who have just run out of gas. Cooley happens to be my last name. It happened to be my town that the UFO flap was in, but I swear I didn't see a thing. So I don't. My dad was chief deputy of the county sheriff's office at that time too, and I hope they weren't. I swear they weren't referencing us, at least as far as I know.
You never know.
But anyway, those are the two episodes that I wanted to talk about because you didn't have quite. They didn't make a reference that would be apropos for your book, but I wanted to discuss those episodes with you because I thought they both brought about important issues that were worth talking about.
And I think the episode with the UFO might be because she made a joke about Oprah Winfrey in that episode, and I think that one there's an entry about Oprah Winfrey.
There is,
in the book.
because UFOs are not that thin or that bright, and neither is Oprah Winfrey, but that doesn't make her a flying saucer. Yep. See, I don't even have to look at the book. I can just
I don't either.
I can spat them off just like that, and And you would think that you having this big successful book about the Golden Girls that you would be from L.A., New York. Nope, you're from right here. You're from 2 hours down the road. You're from Charleston, West Virginia.
That's where I'm from. And it's surprising that this book has been so embraced. The Golden Girls fans, it's a large group and it's a very supportive group, and they have really helped me to promote this project.
Well, good. Well, you need to help me write something so I can get in with the Golden Girls fans and get to go to these wonderful conventions and meet these wonderful people like Julie McCullough. You want to talk about her a little bit?
Sure. I didn't know her before we met the other day, but she's living in Princeton, West Virginia now. And I thought, well, how do you end up in Princeton? It's a great little town, but it's not one you think of moving to. But she had West Virginia roots. I don't think she's from West Virginia, but she spent her summers growing up in West Virginia and wanted to move. She wanted to move to a smaller, quieter town and buy a big house and just live. And was visiting various towns and fell in love with Princeton and has been there. I don't know how long she's been there, maybe less than a year, I think. But she loves it. And she was very nice and loves to talk about the show, and I had a great time. She had, everybody, the people that were there were asking if she had any behind the scenes, gossip or anything, but she said everybody was lovely, Betty White is just as wonderful as you hoped she would be.
Mm-hmm.
And all four of the ladies were so supportive and kind, and that's the kind of stuff you want to hear about your heroes.
Yeah, I've met a few people because I go to Mayberry Days in Mount Airy, North Carolina, and Desilu Studios that did Andy Griffith also did was also the same spot for Golden Girls. So I've met a few people who have guest starred with the Golden Girls. Eleanor Donahue, Ronnie Shell, and they all say that Bea was the difficult one, Bea Arthur.
Yeah, I have heard that she's a tough nut. She was a tough nut to crack because I went to the Golden Girls convention in Chicago, so a lot of the actors and writers and producers were there, and that was the general feeling about Bea, was she sort of ran the show, you know, and could be a little tough because I think Bea and Dorothy had a lot in common.
Yeah. But I've heard that everybody else is really super nice. Of all the references that were made in here, do you have a favorite one or two?
Let's see. Well, you know, I'm a big fan of the spin-off show Empty Nest.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people don't remember Empty Nest because it hasn't had as much longevity as the Golden Girls. So I put all of those. You know, they appeared on the show all the time, so I explained all of those in the book. So I love doing that. And I don't know if he's my favorite, but you know what one came up the most often was Burt Reynolds.
Oh, yeah.
I think there were about 7 or 8 jokes about Burt Reynolds.
Yeah,
throughout
but
the show.
they were all nuts about Burt, and of course Burt was a guest star at one point, and you had the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater in Miami. I think that had a lot to do with it. But
yeah, and they mentioned that a lot, the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater.
Yeah, but but to talk about Empty Nest was a great show. You know, Richard Mulligan was a very, very funny guy as Dr. Harry Weston.
He was.
And it actually provided a vehicle to continue for Sophia, who is my favorite Golden Girl. She was on the show for 2 years after Golden Palace was axed.
Yeah, Christy McNichol left Empty Nest for, you know, she was having some health issues, and after she left, they never quite knew what to do with themselves, and eventually they brought on Estelle Getty, and it was nice to see her back on Saturday nights.
Yeah, that really, because when you're ringing the doorbell and they open the door and she says, "I'm back," the crowd goes completely nuts.
Yeah,
and
I think her health was starting to suffer a little bit at that time. You can kind of tell if you watch those episodes that she was losing a little bit of her energy from the Golden Girls.
Right, and she unfortunately lived several years with the terrible disease of Lewy body dementia, and which is eventually what claimed her. And that was really sad, 'cause such a brilliant mind. But you know, I recall Rue McClanahan saying, you know, I believe she truly enjoyed every week of Golden Palace because she had stage fright in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that was the reason for her carrying the tan bamboo purse. That was her idea to cancel out her stage fright. And I was always confused. Why is she going to the bathroom and carrying her purse?
With her purse.
Yeah, but you know.
And you know, she later on in Golden Girls, she would use cue cards if she had a long monologue to say to help her remember, because she was starting to have some memory problems.
Right.
So yeah, if you watch it, you can sometimes tell that she's sort of looking a little towards the camera or a little towards the front of the stage, and that's because she was looking at her cue card. Either way, she made it work.
Yeah, they were also brilliant, and I'm so glad they all won an Emmy, because how many shows do you have where every principal cast member is taking home an Emmy?
I think that's pretty rare.
And, you know, I love Lucy Collector. And when I was about 10 years old in 1995, I was collecting everything Lucy that there was. And at about that time, it was when I started looking for Golden Girls things. And at that time, there were no Golden Girls books. There were no Golden Girls trivia game. There was no. Now there's everything from games to T-shirts to, as you said, even breakfast cereal, which I have not seen.
It was a limited edition thing that Target did a few years ago, and it was terrible. I tried some.
I was going to say, what kind of cereal was it?
You know, it was a spinoff of the Funko Pop toy line.
Right.
And it was round like a Fruit Loop, but it was like this artificial blue color. And
the Funko Pops are not a likeness to the Golden Girls at all.
No.
And some of these things, it's just like, it just cannot be direct because it doesn't even resemble anything close to either of the four of them.
No, I think a real Golden Girls cereal would have been, Bran Flakes or something a little more tame.
Or were they, they got into an argument about the Raisin Bran. Does it go in the regular or the canister or anything like that?
It's not hard to find Golden Girls merchandise nowadays. I mean, it is everywhere and on everything.
Yeah, Golden Girls is now as definitive and iconic now as I Love Lucy. And
I agree.
And my three favorites are Lucy, Golden Girls, and Andy Griffith. So if you do another follow-up, because I know you've been asked, I would love to see something on I Love Lucy, because most people living today wouldn't understand the 50s references.
That's true. And I haven't watched Lucy in a while. I used to love it because my grandma watched it on Nick at Night when I was a kid in the 90s, and I watched it all the time with her.
Yep.
Same as I did with Golden Girls.
2 hours every Saturday night. That's how I got hooked on it. And then they were doing 2 or 3 hours a day of Golden Girls on Lifetime. And I would tape them on VHS because they didn't release them on video. And then the day they came out on DVD, I would have them pre-ordered and all, and I have all the seasons, and I've been watched them until they don't work anymore. And
Me too.
And I hope that they'll come out again on Blu-ray or be re-released on DVD so I can afford to get a new set. But
I watch them now on Hulu, and they put Golden Palace, the spinoff, on Hulu now.
Really?
They added it, I think, earlier this year.
Yeah. I watched every episode of that. I sat in front of the TV on Monday nights, 8 years old, and watching that. And I remember that every week with Cheech Marin and Don Cheadle before he became the big Oscar-winning actor.
It was. I mean, it wasn't the same without Dee, but it was still nice to see those characters. Carry on for another year.
Yeah, you really wanted it to go. I mean, people who loved them were really rooting for it and wanted it to go, but you knew it just couldn't go. Like Betty White says, they're like four legs on a table. You saw one of them off the table, it's not going to stand.
Yep.
And
I've heard her say too, they were 4 points on a compass.
Yes. And
I thought that's so nice because each of those characters were so different, but they came together so perfectly.
And they totally were. And so we've got. I have done most of the talking this time instead of you. I apologize for that, but it happens to be one of my favorite subjects. So.
Hey, I can listen and talk about Golden Girls all day long.
Well, one of the things I was hoping to find in the book that I didn't is the episode where Magda comes, the Russian cousin, comes to stay with them, and she says, I want you to read Vanna White's book because it's a great book. Do you know what about that book would have been so wonderful or so?
I'm pretty sure there was nothing wonderful. I think it was just a joke at the expense of Vanna White.
A joke on the fact that it would be a very dull book because
Yeah, I think so.
She was born in Myrtle Beach. I know that. And
Oh, really? I didn't know that about her.
my parents lived there. And there's a reference when they were on the game show, when they were on Grab That Dough, where she said, Tiffany, honey, I thought those pictures of you in that sleazy magazine was so tastefully done. That was a jab at Vanna White, because she had posed for Playboy before she got famous, and they found those pictures or whatever around that time. So that was a supposed jab at Vanna. So I don't know.
You know what's funny about the Vanna White book is that once upon a time, if you would go to Amazon and look for that book, you know how Amazon will often give you examples of purchases that people made along with that book. Well, in the Golden Girls episode, the two books Dorothy recommends are Vanna White's book and Thomas Paine's Common Sense.
And they're linked together.
Yep.
Wow.
Isn't that funny?
The two most, they couldn't be farther apart, but because Dorothy suggested it, everybody went and bought them.
That's the power of the Golden Girls.
Yeah, Vanna can thank Golden Girls. And there was a lot of references to Lucy, who is my other favorite. I think they all knew and were rather friendly with Lucy. In fact, you can go on YouTube and see Betty and Estelle and Lucy and another lady from the series she was trying to do at the time that flopped, doing Super Password together. And that's a neat thing to watch. But anyway.
I'll tell you something I learned about Lucy was that there's an episode of the Golden Girls where Rose's sister visits and she's blind, and
Polly Holiday. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they had originally approached Lucy for that role.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I think she wasn't interested in playing a blind character, is why she didn't take the job.
Right.
Yeah, she was the original choice for that character.
But I had heard that Lucy, that was her favorite show on TV at the time, and they said, "Why haven't you been on Golden Girls?" And she says, "I haven't been asked." And if you go if you go on YouTube, there's a Q&A from 1989, April 15th, 1989, and Paul Witt says it would be a great honor for us all to work with Lucy. But Lucy died April 26th, 1989. So they didn't make it. But I've often thought Lucy would have been so great, if they had.
It makes you wonder if Lucy had still been alive. They ended the show because Dee wanted to leave.
Oh, yeah.
And there was talk about maybe finding somebody to fill that void and just go with the regular Golden Girls show. It makes you wonder if Lucy would have been interested had she been alive.
That is very interesting. But I wish Lucy had guest starred, because I think she would have been so great.
She would have, maybe as Dorothy's sister, I bet she would have been good in that role.
Yeah, Gloria. Yeah.
Could you imagine those two up against each other?
There are two, because they worked together, Bea and Lucy, on a movie revival of Mame, which I'm sure you know. The movie flopped because Bea was in her regular Broadway character of Vera Charles, and Lucy was in Angela Lansbury's character. And God bless her, as much as I love Lucy couldn't sing, so she couldn't hold up that musical part. But
Angela Lansbury would have been a good guest star, but she was busy doing Murder, She Wrote.
That's true, and her and Bea were best friends. So, and I just, I just think that it would have been great to have Lucy. As a part of that, because I think they all drew from Lucy for that show.
I think probably every sitcom comedy actors drew from Lucy in one way or the other,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
And now everybody's trying to draw from the Golden Girls.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
But Lucy is something you can't duplicate. Golden Girls are something you can't duplicate. Let me just, in these last couple of minutes, explain what your favorite episodes of Golden Girls and what they mean to you. I've talked enough about what they mean to me.
You know, I'll tell you what they mean to me is I approach watching the Golden Girls like comfort food. You know, like if you have a bad day, you can turn it on and you know you'll be cheered up. You know, you'll laugh. You know, and you'll learn something in a lot of the episodes. It's just funny. It's well written. You have the chemistry of those four actresses and those four characters. It just is so well done that it's going to stand the test of time, despite all of the dated references that my book explains. And my favorite episode, it's funny, I was at that Golden Girls convention and they asked me that question along with another author. And he had this real deep, profound answer to why his favorite was his favorite. But my favorite is my favorite just because it's funny, and it's the one where Frida Claxton lives next door and they're arguing with her over the tree that they're cutting down. And Rose tells her to drop dead, and of course, being a sitcom, she drops dead.
She does.
Well, that's my favorite episode just because it's so funny.
Thank you, Matt, for giving me your time this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Again, thank you for sending me a copy of the book. It's wonderful. I hope I will sell a few around Whitfield for you. And if you're ever in the area, please stop in and see us.
Will do. There's a great bookshop there, so I need to come back and visit.
Yep, and get your book on sale there, or give a book talk there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.